So I have here my 56°, my sand wedge, and let's start to identify exactly what the bounce is and how we measure it. The front part of the club is called the leading edge, and the back part instead, which is also, you can see here, the flange, is slightly lower than the front part. The angle in between the leading edge and the back part of the club is what we call the bounce. So, in order to make it an analogy easier to understand, I would like you guys to think of the wedge as a plane landing. The leading edge, we will consider them as the front wheels. The back edge of the club will be instead the back wheels of the plane. So based on the type of lie that we have, if we need more of a steep descending action, let's say the ball is sitting down in the rough and we want to have the club hitting the ball first, we might put the leading edge in favor rather than using the back wheels or both wheels. So to summarize this, steeper, we're going to try and nosedive the plane. If we want it somewhat shallower, we're going to try and land the plane with both wheels at the same time. And in certain shots, not just on the grass or around the green, but as well from the bunker, we might want to be using the back wheels of the plane. And I know, Jim, that you've developed wedges and bounces for Casco, so maybe you can talk us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I had the great opportunity when I was with Casco to design wedges for them. They were called the Mr. 60, Mr. 56, and Mr. 52, so the Mr. series. And yeah, I took a deep dive into sand wedges and looked at the greatest sand wedges that the best players had ever played and how they were designed. So when you look at the wedges like that, you're looking at the width of this, we could call it a skid plate, the part that skids on the ground with your sand wedges, as you were mentioning, they bounce. Of how wide it is there any roll on the front and the back? Do we narrow the back edge here so you can do certain things? And then another thing is, do you roll the front leading edge? And a lot of sand wedges are straight across, and some people like that. There have been great players that do it, but when you put the club down, I'll do it right here, I'll put the golf club down on the ground. When you have a rolled front, that allows you to put the club down more like this, so you can get the whole bottom of the club on and really open the face up and aim the club wherever you want to. So there's a lot of benefits to having roll on the bottom, which I like. Some people like that, some don't. What do you think?
I mean, once again, I think it really depends on the skill set of the player. I would think of more of an amateur golfer, not necessary to create so many variables,
right,
trying to create more of a stock shot, but definitely with higher skill set players, the ability to, open the face more, put the swing plane more upright, more flat.
Right.
All these variables can actually help us a lot in shot making around the green.
And absolutely, the width of the bounce can make a big difference. So sometimes you see the big wide bottoms and big roll. That would be people that are really bad diggers, and that would really help them to skid, to not dig so deep. People that lean the shaft too much forward. There's been so much discussion over the last years about leaning the shaft forward and getting your hands forward that you've seen more people have difficulty with the shot we have right here, which is a little uphill into the grain. And if you dig on this shot, you have no chance. Obviously, we're going to talk about this shot and some other shots, but the shot we have right here is uphill and into the grain. So when you're in that sort of condition, what do?
Now, I think that the first commandment is, when you have an uneven lie, is to match the incline with your shoulders. Now, this isn't a very steep incline. However, if it didn't become any steeper, you would not want to be playing against the incline with your shoulders, because then you would have a very steep and descending action of the club head combined with the nosedive or the leading edge working into that. And the shot that's going to come out is going to be very low with uncontrollable spin and very high ball speed. So this type of shot, we're also against the grain. So there's a couple of adjustments which are key here. Number one, probably because it's uphill, instead of taking a 60° or a 56, you might as well be taking a gap wedge, because as I match the incline with my shoulders, what happens to the loft of the club? It's going to increase. Now, ball position won't necessarily have to be so far back in my stance already because of the incline. And then I'm going to make sure that my hands aren't leaning forward as much just because of the previous points that we have discussed. So let me just go through basic key points here. Club selection, if it's uphill, we're going to take a little less loft. We're always trying to match the incline of the lie with our shoulders. Ball position can be somewhat more centered, not necessarily on the back foot. And as we approach the shot, we're going to make sure that our hands, instead of being inside our left thigh, will be even in the middle of our body, or in some cases, we might even want to lean the shaft backwards. Do you want to try a few, Jim?
Yeah, well, this is a very interesting shot because of these tight lies that we now see at many golf courses and wet conditions. So those two combinations make these shots, I'll just kind of roll one out here so we're not just teeing it up, make this shot one of the scariest shots for pros. And let's talk about why we go down in loft. And to me, I want you to say something here too, but to me, I don't have to swing as hard. That's number one. I can also open the blade a little bit, and this is my 50-degree sand, pitching wedge, sand wedge, gap wedge, we call it, and it still has bounce. Not as much bounce as my sand wedge, but it still has bounce. And when I open the face, that is one way to increase bounce. Brando also mentioned the other way, and that's leaning the club shaft away from the target. That's the other way to add bounce. So you have two ways: back and open, increase bounce, and give you a better chance of skidding on this shot going through it. So you can see how easy it catches here, and this grain's really going against me. Okay, so on this shot, I've got about 35 feet of green. I'm going up over rough or grass that I want to land it up on the green, and I want to just pick that ball off. So a little open face. I think one other thing, Brando, you can walk back in here. One other thing that's helped me on this shot is making sure that I kept the blade square going through, that I didn't put any, for me, my right hand in the shot, and I try to just nip through. But you can still see, even though I was trying to not hit any grass, this is such strong grain here going into me. If you catch any of the grass at all, it catches the club. So you got to make sure you catch that golf ball first. That ball probably is about 7 feet from the hole on about a 20-yard shot. So it's okay, it's fair. I wouldn't take it over if I was in a tournament. But what else do you have to talk about on this shot?
I mean, in trying to create a better low point control, another thing that we can do is a little less down cock the hands. If the hands rise a little bit, that's actually going to stabilize a lot the low point control.
Okay, so now I take the club up.
Yep.
And why does this help me?
Well, basically what we're doing is we're limiting the deviation, the ulnar deviation here. So the higher the handle is, not only I'm going to have more of a straight path back and through.
Let's look at that down the target line.
But
so talk about the same thing.
So not only I'm going to have a straighter path back and through, but if my hands start more down cocked, the moment I release this angle, I will actually be creating more of a deeper low point. So if I stand a little bit closer and taller, my wrist angles are going to be more similar to what I would have in my putting stroke, to the point where I could even grip the club in my palm to avoid any type of down cocking and cocking of the wrist, and just making more consistent the low point.
Does it get a little harder to hit it further this way though, doesn't it?
Yes.
That was better.
A little cleaner, right?
Yeah, that worked good. So let's review that. Getting the club up a little more allows me to stand closer to the golf ball, allows me a little straighter path, more of a putting stroke, and you feel like you're not using too much wrist action in that shot.
Absolutely.
So let's go back and talk about bounce. We increased the bounce, we talked about that. We talked about the width of the sand wedge. When would you use this, the 58 or 60 degree on this shot?
Well, clearly it has to do not only with the overall distance that my target is, but also how much roll time I have. So in this case here, we have about 35% of flight time available. Let's say if the pin was much closer to us.
Let's say if we move the pin up really close.
Then at that point, we would have to work on having a higher or at least a slower ball flight so that the ball could still land. And it's important to try and land it as much as we can on the green so that we can predict exactly the ball will react. Here in Miami, we have this type of grass, which is kind of unpredictable when we land it, because sometimes it gets, the ball just spins and dies there. Sometimes it kicks forward. So we're always trying to land it directly on the green. And at that point then we would be using more of a 58 or a 60 degree, just keeping in mind that usually our lob wedge tends to have less bounce than our sand wedge. So sure, we have...
Oh, wait a minute, now why is that?
Well, the reason why we do that is also based on, let's say we're in the bunker, okay? So my recommendation would always be with a 56 degree, I'm going to have a slightly higher bounce. If I have fluffier sand, more amount of sand, what will that create in terms of ball flight? More sand, slower ball speed. So I can counter that by less loft and less digging power, which is given by the higher amount of bounce.
Okay. So let's go to this shot then.
Okay.
We're going to go to this shot. We got a really narrow pin close to us, very little green. We're going up, we're downwind, we got everything going against us now.
Yep.
This might be a shot, if I was in a tournament, I would really consider putting it up that hill or using a hybrid up the hill. Sure. But let's say for some reason it's high grass here, or there's a bunker here, we got to go short, we got to hit the shot. We're one down, last hole.
Yep.
What do we do?
Well, first of all, club selection. We're going to pick the higher lofted club.
You want to hit this shot?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. This is a tough one. Let me get out of the way here.
Now, I'm not necessarily looking for extra height. I'm going to look for lower ball speed and more spin. What I'm looking for here is not necessarily such a narrow stance as I would with my chip shot. My stance is going to be somewhat wider. When I set up, the ball will be just left of center. I'm going to make sure that my chest will be covering my left leg to get to about 60% on my lead foot. Now, as I do this, I will also put in favor my shoulders pointing a little bit more open. So I'm going to try and have always somewhat of a descending blow of the club, but with the swing direction or the club swinging left. That should increase the amount of backspin of the ball. Now, I personally like to play these shots utilizing the bounce. So my feel in the downswing will actually be that the club head is coming down because of gravity, and my impact will happen with my hands in front of my right leg instead of leaning the shaft forward, which would decrease the loft and expose too much the leading edge. So I'm going to pick my spot, couple of rehearsals. Now in my pre-shot routine, what I do is I do more practice swings than my long game, and the reason why that is because I actually have a finesse shot here to understand and to replicate then when I'm hitting. So the first practice swing could be understanding what type of resistance is the grass giving me. If I'm against the grain and I have a straight club face, I might notice that the club is going to get stuck. So that brings up to my first setup adjustment, which is opening the face. Then I have another practice swing, which will be kind of like feeling the length of the swing while I'm observing my land spot. My third practice swing will be matching the length of the swing as well as the power or the speed of it. Once I've figured out these three variables, I will then go into my last and final practice swing and then execute my shot.
That is beautifully executed right there, Brando. Nice job. I think the thing for me that I loved everything you said, but the throwing of the club or the early release of the club. And you know what's really interesting to me in playing a million pro-ams that I've played in, sometimes the higher handicappers, like 18 to 25 handicappers, hit this shot really good because they release it early, and I'm really jealous. You know, I see them hit this shot, I say, oh man, I said, I wish I could do that. But that's when the early the early throw, we could call it,
Yep.
the early release increases the bounce
Yep.
and gets the club to go right underneath the ball, and that's the shot you want to hit for an unbelievable shot that Brando just hit right there. Such a perfect shot that you might see on the PGA Tour. Now, Brando, I would say that takes some practice.
Absolutely, yes.
You got to work on that. He gave you a detailed approach on how to use the bounce of the club for the high, short shot. Now, when it's not in these conditions, when it's not into the grain, when it's not wet underneath, it gets a little bit easier. This is actually, I think, to me, the most difficult kind of shot you could have, and you pulled it off just perfect.